Welcome to Driving a Growth Agenda, a special Art of Procurement series in partnership with iValua, where we explore how procurement leaders can help their organizations focus on the top line as well as the bottom line. My name is Philip Eidson, the host of Art of Procurement, and in today's first episode in our four-part series, I talk with Sylvie Noel, the CPO of Covéa, a multinational financial services company based out of Paris, France. Today, we'll dive into topics such as what are the top opportunities for procurement to contribute to growth, and how can procurement leaders effectively expand their influence in their organization. We'll also talk a little bit about the keys to gaining executive support for the required investments that give you the capabilities to drive a growth agenda. Now, before I start, I do want to let you know that we created a printable one-page cheat sheet to accompany this series, which includes the 5 questions to ask yourself as you consider how you can help drive a growth agenda, 4 different growth levers that procurement can pull, and a summary of the procurement foundations you must build to deliver growth. You can download that today at artofprocurement.com/growth series. That's all one word, artofprocurement.com/growth series. So let's go straight into the conversation today, where I ask Sylvie if she could provide some context behind the role of procurement at Covéa.
So I'm the CPO of a Covéa. Covéa is a mostly French company based in Paris, but not only in Paris. We have more than 22,000 employees, but still we have some subsidiary, a small one in the UK, the smallest one in the US, one in the UK, one in Italy, one in Luxembourg, just to make a raw picture about it. The procurement was really created in 2012, and I was lucky enough to be enabled to have that job, and I'm still into it. So I have a team more or less between 40 and 50 people, and I'm working on direct and indirect for insurance. So people might be surprised sometimes to say that you have direct in insurance. Right. Yes, we do. Because when you are insured in a company and you have a problem with your a flood or a car accident, and luckily you need to, of course, to be rescued or to be helped or to have any kind of services. So that's pure part of the business, and yes, we are involved into it. So just to give you some numbers, procurement in Covéa is more or less in France 2 billion euros a year. That's mostly what I could say about my role. I could say many things about it, but it's mostly what I'm doing right now.
From a I'm thinking the right word, and it may not be maturity being the right word, but in terms of an engagement with the business, how well engaged are your procurement group with your stakeholders across the organization?
Well, to be very honest, it was a long path, and the path is not yet finished, but I don't know whether it can be finished any day.
Right.
But first of all, it was very complicated because we have a job that everybody is doing daily. You go at daily, we all buy, which is not the case with any kind of other business where you are in HR, you are in marketing, you are in finance. Of course, you're specialized, you're entitled to be specialized. Buying, as we are all daily buyers, people think they know how to buy. Yeah. And usually the only people, especially in new organization, they have about procurement is that, well, the proposal was 100. Of course, they will negotiate it, and they'll be happy to negotiate it. And they will win, I don't know, 10, 20%. That's the only thing they can do. So that's mostly the main problem procurement is facing, especially when it started. And that, of course, the main problem I had to face when I started in 2012. But luckily, with all the job we've been doing and with a great team I do have, stakeholders, especially the one who worked with us, realized we could really bring added value and bring even growth to them, because that's as well the topic of today. Bringing growth is one thing which is very important, and we should be both normally and initially involved with common KPI, because of course, if ideally a commercial, for instance, or business would be involved with the same KPI as procurement, I'm totally sure the kind of business and involvement both would have would be totally different. That's for sure. In very, very little companies, because I'm lucky enough to know many of my peers working in procurement, it's very uncommon, still very uncommon,
Right.
but it really should change. And I think it would be really a key of evolution and a improvement in enabling really procurement where it should be. Still now with my stakeholders, we are working more and more tightly, not as tightly I would like, because initially what would be really the dream, apart from having common KPI, would be to be able all the time to work with them and to build the budget with them. Yeah. As soon as you're, from the beginning, from everything, first you can understand, you can help, you can find the right suppliers, you can be as involved as soon as possible with the best possible sourcing. You can push innovation, you can challenge your suppliers, you can innovate internally and externally. Now, all that is everything we can do, and we can do even much more. But I mean, with that and for that, we need our stakeholders to understand and to want and to share their projects and to involve us in this project. Right. So the biggest challenge we have in procurement is that one for me.
So you think about being more aligned with the organizer, with your stakeholders. You mentioned that the series that we have is really talking about growth and how do we help our organizations grow, as opposed to always focusing perhaps on the bottom line and not really taking a bigger picture perspective. Even where you don't have necessarily joint KPIs, how do you encourage your teams to think about and how do you enable them, even with behind the scenes, to really be better connecting with what the goals of their individual stakeholders are, as opposed to even focusing on what their own KPI is when there may be a conflict?
For my team especially, my word is think business first. So what would be the best possible solution you could offer business to be better? Yeah. Better might be more competitive, might be more reactive, might be more efficient, might be what kind of services you can give them that don't have time or they didn't have time previously to do internally, and that you could find for free maybe and involve that in a contract you already have. How can you push a vendor to create new solution and to build new solution with your business? That's for me the goal. So think business first. So it means that for my team, my biggest challenge is for them to know who they are working with. Yeah. What is really the business or the stakeholders? Because of course, if they don't understand what they are doing, no way they can be any creative. Right. It's just impossible. The thing as well I push hard is, of course, we might have very good vendors right now, and the one we've been working for a long time, and I'm not saying they're not good, but I mean, we know already, and the market is moving very, very quickly now with the new ideas, new technology, new startups, new everything. So source, push some curiosity in scouting more, source differently, see new kind of vendors. Don't be afraid sometimes when you have vendors proposing AI. Don't be afraid when you have startup, even if of course, they are more fragile than a big company could be. And financially, you've got to be secure. And of course, they will not agree on the contract we do have with many, many pages. But I mean, be more flexible, be more intelligent. If you can give added value to your business with this new vendor, do it, push it.
And how do you think about then managing that performance when it comes to let's just say, and I'm not quite sure what your KPIs are within your organization, but there'll be a lot of people listening that have KPIs that are cost savings focused. And there's this kind of conflict between thinking
Mine are
first,
not.
right? So, balancing the need for that versus really pushing, your teams to think differently.
In my new organization, we've changed in September. I've got two big organizations inside. Mm-hmm. One is called Performance, which means that we already have kind of some contracts with some vendors we had for a couple of times. And I want my team to challenge the stakeholders and the vendors of new way of working.
Yeah.
So to perform for me is, of course, we've been working for 5 years with this kind of technology or with this kind of services. Think differently. Mm-hmm. Think out of the box and give added value for everybody. That's the first one. The second one is we have new project in the company. Push innovation. Challenge the vendors we already have. But I mean, be careful on every new solution, not being stupid and taking risks, because as well, you've got to be careful on what you're pushing. Fair enough. You have the responsibility of being reliant and of being, compliant and everything. Fair enough. But taking that into account, I'm definitely sure we can find and work differently. But I mean, for that's the key is curiosity.
Yeah.
You've got to emphasize on the soft skills people have to develop. Even if I'm not very keen on the word soft skills, because behind that, you've got many other things I don't really like. I mean, I would rather say that for me, being curious, it's really key. Mm-hmm. Thinking differently is really key. This kind of, craziness might be interesting as well if it's being crazy under control.
Yep, not being fearful.
Exactly,
being considered, but not having
exactly.
You feel like you're not afraid, that you're afraid to do anything, or you're afraid to push the boundaries.
Totally, and as well, one of the things which is very important for me is don't be afraid to be challenged. Mm-hmm. To be challenged is the key of improvement. Yeah. If you are challenged either with or with your stakeholders or even your vendors, I'm sorry, you can't do that. It's very interesting to be challenged, and of course, you'll be challenged with your peers. It's very, very interesting to be able to speak with other people, to involve other people, and not to be afraid to do so.
Now, I know that from you intimated that you started to build the procurement organization back in 2012, and we've actually talked before we started to record about the importance of digitalization to everything that you're doing right now, and how that's really an enabler of this ability to think a little bit differently and to operate a little bit differently. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how such an investment in technology has enabled you to do some of the things that perhaps your team weren't able to do without it.
Well, to be very honest with you, when I started thinking about this new organization, I was facing some problems. The problems were my teams was in 5 or 6 different places based in France. So I didn't see my team regularly. The level of maturity was not very high, and it's not very impolite to say so, but I mean, it's just reality. And the third thing, from the beginning, people told me you would not have any money for trainings. So considering all these elements, I had to think differently and say, how could I work? How could I honestly find a solution who can fulfill these problematics I do have, and I don't have any money for? Mm-hmm. And I thought about, is there any way and a technology could be helpful? And thinking about it, I started working and benchmarking software vendors on the market. But my criteria first was business. Yeah. So I didn't want a tool to make a tool. I wanted to have my process. So I thought first about how do I want to work? What are my goals? And then afterwards, is it possible to find on the market? a tool. We will sustain everything we've worked on in terms of business. And as well, a tool which will be able, long lasting, to evolve and to be able to be dynamic enough to give me the possibility of changing my organization, of putting more maturity. With the maturity I will gain either with the stakeholders and or the vendors, and to have as well a pure way of sharing, of transparency, and of compliance. So that was really initially the thought I had. And it was a very big challenge, to be honest with you, because in 2012, thinking of business first and thinking of that kind of technology, some of my peers were using some models which were much more P2P or catalogs, because first you're thinking, of course, P2P is quite simple. Of course, you just match. It's not complaint, but I mean, you just match, a PO with an invoice. It's not complicated. To put catalogs on, complicated either. So to think from the sourcing and all the different process you have in procurement till you go to the repository and the life of the contract is another thing. And then to decide to open it to the stakeholders, and then to open it to the vendors and to say there's only one single place where we are all going to work. That's the way it is.
That's a change management, certainly a change management initiative going on there.
Exactly. A very big one. Yeah.
Now, the last question I have, just to understand, so you used technology and digitization as a foundation of, being able to bring transparency, of being able to, be more efficient and effective throughout the procurement process. I think this is especially an interesting question, given what you said about the fact that you're not really measured on cost savings. So from an ROI perspective, it's sometimes harder for somebody outside of procurement to look and say, okay, if we make an investment in procurement, whether it's in people, whether it's in processes, whether it's in technology, traditionally folks would look at that and say, I'm going to save you X, and therefore there's my ROI. When you don't have that, how are you making the business case to actually get the investment that you needed to be able to grow your team, whether that's through technology or whether that's through people?
I involved stakeholders concerned with compliance, because compliance is very important.
Yeah.
I involve internal control and audit, because for them, being able to justify everything we're doing and to be sure everything at that one single place and being complete is pure security for the company. And for some subject in particular, we've made a focus on the added value. It would be, of course, counting it numerously, I would say, sharing all the information with the stakeholders and the vendors.
Yeah.
So we were able to put numbers behind a declaration, I would rather say. And now we are the tool which is recognized in the company as the only tools for all the information concerning 17,000 suppliers for the company.
Now, I know I said that's my last question, but I do have one follow-up, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. My follow-up is, as you went on that journey then, and it was quite a change initiative, how did you think about where to start? Were there particular areas like capabilities that you wanted to enable first? Did you go big picture and try to do as much as you could as quickly as possible? I'd just love to know a little bit about that journey.
My journey was to... well, it was very complicated because I was starting from scratch, and the maturity was very, very low, as I said previously. And secondly, Covéa is not one company. Initially, it's 3 different companies with different subsidiaries. So my very, very first step was to have the people around the table to understand, first of all, to have common words. If you put a word like sourcing, what is the definition of sourcing? Yeah. It might be very stupid, but if you don't have this key to start, it doesn't work. So it took us quite a while, but at the same time, it was very interesting because people met each other, discussed with each other, and of course, it was very interesting as well to estimate the level of maturity they had behind the words.
Right.
So that was the very, very third thing. Then we had a very clear calendar and we didn't hide anything. And so we said, we want first to think business. We don't want to think tool or whatever. So what do we want as procurement tomorrow for this group? How far do we want to go and who is going to be involved? And we had these people around the table, and the definition of all that, they could speak, they could discuss. Of course, after a while, we had to shut it off and say, hi guys, we've heard everybody.
Yeah.
Now we decided on one, and it's going to be the one. But I mean, it can't be 100% people saying, oh, it's fantastic because it's a change management project on top. But I mean, as long and as soon as you involved the right people from the beginning and the project, and these people were HR people, were IT people, were legal people, of course, accounting, internal controllers, all these people were key in the system of the company. Of course, afterward, they can criticize and say, no, I don't want that. I wanted the bottom up and not down. Of course, fair enough. But still, they were involved. Yeah. And same thing, when we had a short list and a proof of concept, they tasted the tool, and we had the process sustained by the tools. So they could make a fair comparison between I want it, I don't want it. Yeah. Of course, they found it tricky and hard, and oh my God, before it was much more easy. I was just giving a call and I'm order. So fine, so nice. Yeah, but I mean, it was yesterday. Today and tomorrow is going to be different. So for me, that's one of the key. Involve the people, listen to the people, of course, be able to stop them at a time. But I mean, if you share with people, but it's probably the same thing like in life. I think it helps a lot.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. We created a printable one-page cheat sheet to accompany this series, which includes the 5 questions to ask yourself as you consider how you can help drive a growth agenda, 4 growth levers that procurement can pull, and a summary of the procurement foundations you must build to deliver growth. It's all the information we pulled together into one page from this series. You can download that today at artofprocurement.com/growth series. That's artofprocurement.com